Hello, AP World students. Today I am going to talk to you about the Mongolians, or as College Boards puts it, the Mongol Empire and the making of the modern world. And we will get into why they call it that later on in these slides. So, if you don't know too much about Mongolia, it is a very large country with very few people. It's very spread out. You have a lot of mountains in Mongolia and a lot of pasture. Pasture is good for grazing animals. Not a lot of good farmland in Mongolia, unfortunately. So that's really what they're going to rely on. And there is some deserts as well in Mongolia. The people in Mongolia have a very vibrant culture that has been around for thousands of years. And oftentimes people think of them as just these barbarians that took over and were, killing people left and right. But in reality, they have a much bigger, deeper culture. Uh, but where we are in history, this might be why a College Board chose the year 1200 to start your course, because what happens in the year 1200 is, or 1206, a man named Temujin is elected leader of all of the Mongolians, and he takes for himself the name Great Khan or Genghis Khan, and you've probably heard of him. Just one little more thing about the Mongols, though, is they are nomadic because, again, they don't have farmland. It doesn't make sense for them to settle down in one place and try to live off the land. So what they do is they graze animals and they follow the animals wherever they go. And in order to follow animals, you need to be able to ride a horse, or else you'll never keep up. So they become these amazing horse riders, and archers is their main method of protection and hunting. Okay, so back to Genghis Khan. Genghis Khan is probably one of the most famous people in history for good reason. He united all of the Mongol tribes. He organizes them in a way, instead of before him, all of these small Mongol tribes would fight each other, kill each other, fight over the little bit of land and grazing territory and animal territory they have. So when he unites them, when he does this brilliant thing where he splits up all of the tribes. So he organizes everybody in groups of 10, and everybody, again everybody thinks of Genghis Khan as this like barbarian who must have been really stupid and a savage, and killing people left and right, and people sometimes say he's a cannibal, blah blah blah. It's all pretty much lies. He was a very smart tactician and very organized. He organized all of his troops in groups of 10, so 10 troops, then 100 troops, then 1,000 troops. And in that group of 10, he made sure to have nobody from the same tribe, so that there's no loyalty to tribe, there's loyalty to Mongolia, to the leader, right? To him. So he also then is also going to promote them based on merit and skill. A lot of leaders up to this point will just give the best job to their friends or the people from their country or their family members. Whoever the best person in that group of 10, they're the one who's the leader. Whoever the best person in that group of 100, they're the leader. So it really not only builds morale and a sense of teamwork, but everybody works harder because they know if they work hard, they can get promoted and promoted and promoted. On top of that, he is just a really good general. He is a good tactician. He knows how to fight wars. Um, One of the things that he doesn't necessarily get credit for, but is probably the most important thing, is his psychological warfare. Again, there's this big picture of the Mongolians being this terrible, bloodthirsty, group of people who, savaged everything, blah blah blah, right? In reality, they probably weren't half as bad as history books say, because they wanted everybody to think they were scary, so that when they rolled up to a city, they can say, hey, I know you've heard about us. We've destroyed cities in our path. If you just give up, we'll let you be free, and you can be a part of our empire, right? So it's this whole tactic of getting everybody really afraid of you, so that when you come, they don't even want to fight you because they know they're going to lose, and they know that you're going to kill all of them, right? Maybe they did kill a few cities. It was a brutal time period, right? But half as bad as they say they were is probably more accurate. On top of it, he does not, again, just use, brute force and whatever tactics he already knew. Wherever he goes, if he learns a new military technique, he's going to use it. We'll get to that in another slide. Um, and then on top of it, we'll get more to this later too. He once he takes a place over, he lets people be whatever religion they want. He elevates the status of women in almost every place he goes to, and he makes trade and travel a lot safer. So there's a lot of good things to Genghis Khan that he doesn't get credit for. So he first takes over all of Mongolia, and he actually gets threatened by the some of the groups around him, and he doesn't actually want to start taking over places, but a lot of them he'll send emissaries to or diplomats to, and they don't take him seriously or they kill his diplomat. There's a lot of reasons why he gets brought into wars that he didn't even want to start in the first place. First, he conquers all of the area around him in Mongolia and a little bit north into what's current day Siberia. Then again, he gets disrespected by the Zhijia, who are a Chinese group north of the Song dynasty. And he decides that he's going to conquer them. So he conquers them, including the city of Beijing. And the group of the Jin and the Zhijia. He conquers both of them. He does not conquer the Song dynasty, which he is really upset about. Once he takes over Chinese territories, he now adopts all of these Chinese tactics, including trebuchets, catapults, and gunpowder. So a trebuchet is this one right here. It's kind of like a much better catapult. Instead of just going one way and just going blink, it swings the thing around and then chucks it, and it can go, 10 times farther than a catapult and a lot stronger. So he, instead of just like the maybe image you might have in your head about him running around on a horse with a bow and arrow, and somehow he's able to take over all these advanced armies, blah blah blah. That's again a false narrative. He takes over these groups and he takes trebuchets. From now on, he's going to be using trebuchets and gunpowder using this weapon that the Chinese had, which was basically a early bazooka. So he's got bazookas, he's got trebuchets, he's got catapults that when he goes and continues to take over places in Persia and Georgia and the Middle East and Europe, he's using all of these really advanced technologies that other parts of the world had not even seen yet. When he dies, his descendants, mostly his grandsons, continue conquering, and they're able to take over Korea and Russia and all of the Abbasid Empire. They destroy, they take over Baghdad. And then eventually they do take over the Song dynasty in China, so they took over all of China eventually. So here's a map where it's showing the progression of the Mongolian Empire, starting in what is modern day Mongolia here. We'll start back here. This is modern Mongolia here. And slowly but surely, they take over almost all of Asia, a good portion of Europe, and a good portion of the Middle East. This will be the largest empire in all of history. The only ones that are maybe a little bit bigger nowadays is possibly the Russian Empire and the British Empire. But it's probable that this is the largest contiguous empire of all time, which means all connected, because the British Empire is split all around the planet. The Mongolian Empire is probably the largest contiguous empire of all time. And most of it was conquered just by Genghis Khan. Okay. So if you look here, you could see eventually we'll talk about these different khanates, but it has almost all of China, Mongolia. Actually, it has all of China, Mongolia, and Korea, and parts of Russia, all the way over, all the way into Central Europe and all of the Middle East, or almost all of the Middle East. So, what is the impact of this? So, they have this huge territory that they've taken over. Now, everybody likes to focus on the fact that they killed a lot of people to take over that territory. And they did kill a lot of people, but again, the numbers historians disagree about. And nowadays, most people are looking back and thinking that historians are probably inflating the number, and it was probably a lot less than they killed. And again, when Genghis Khan started, he didn't do it on purpose. It was kind of like he kept on getting attacked or disrespected by other groups around him, and that's why he started taking over. After he takes over, though, there's going to be a lot of positive things that he implements once he takes over. So again, he's this like evil emperor that's taking over the world. If that's the case, why does he try to make things really safe after he takes it over? So trade is going to really improve along the Silk Road. If you look back at that map, the Silk Road is right in the middle of this Mongol Empire, right? And this roads, there's not really one road that's the Silk Road. It's really a bunch of roads going right through the middle of the Mongolian Empire. So after he conquers everything, we enter a time called Pax Mongolica, which lasted over 100 years. For over 100 years in all of Asia, it's one of the safest times that has ever happened in that territory. You could travel from China all the way to Europe and never be attacked by robbers. Um, and so this is about the safest time since 1000 CE, and it lasts till about 1300 CE. On the Silk Road, they create rest stops where you can, as traders are traveling along, they can stop at these rest stops, and at the rest stops there'll be a market, there'll be an inn where you can stay, there'll be restaurants, there'll be all of this stuff there for people to hang out. They can trade goods there, or they can keep on moving to the next rest stop or further along if they want that. And they can also trade their animals in, either camels or horses, so that they can have fresh animals if they need to. And then on top of it, one of the things, again, we'll get to why they call it the making of the modern world, but quite possibly the first passport is created during this time period. This right here is a Mongolian passport. It is called a paisa, which is the Chinese word for card or sign. And if you carried this, you were allowed to go wherever you wanted in the Mongolian Empire. So we have cultural impacts of the Mongolian Empire as well. The size of the Mongolian Empire holds, thousands of different cultures inside of it, China all the way to Europe. And although there had been interaction between these groups of people for, hundreds of years, never has it happened as easily as it now happens. And one of the reasons why that happens is because the Khans decided they know what they're strong at and what they're not strong at. They're strong at military tacticians and making sure everybody's following the law. What they're not great at is they don't know how to be doctors. They don't know how to be lawyers. They don't know how to be teachers or how to make paper and print documents. So what they do is wherever they are, they say, "I want it. Where's the best doctors? The best doctors are in Arabia. Get me an Arabian doctor." So they have doctors being spread out among the entire large empire. They have people who can make paper spread out among the whole empire, people who can make silk spread out, people who can do whatever they need to are spread out among all of the empire. Remember, the whole empire is almost all of the world, it's all of Asia and Europe. So it's a big territory that now you have experts being spread out around. And this is going to lead to a huge exchange of knowledge that hadn't happened before, right? Chinese knew something and they kind of kept it to themselves. Muslims knew something and they kind of kept it to themselves. But now you have all of that technology spreading around. We have gunpowder spreading because of this. We have Indo-Arabic numerals, the numbers that we use today, spreading because of this. We have Latin sails, which is really going to help with navigation, including the compass as well, medical knowledge, paper making, printing, mathematics. A lot of information is being spread around because of all this. And then one of the negative things that happens because of the Mongol Empire is the spread of diseases. Because travel is so much easier now, if there is a disease that travels because of human travel, that's going to spread a lot easier now. So that's one of the environmental consequences of this connection. You have the Black Death starting in China and spreading along the Silk Roads to the Middle East and then eventually to Africa and Europe. So this is going to cause millions of people dying throughout all of this territory, and it might be one of the factors that eventually leads to the collapse of the Mongol Empire, but we'll talk about that later as well. So This is why a man named Jack Weatherford wrote a book called Genghis Khan and the Making of the Modern World. And in it, he argues that Genghis Khan was not this savage barbarian that everybody's heard of, but actually he is a great man who leads to the beginning of what we would call modern world history. Um, Here's some of the ways he backs up that statement. Uh, in the Mongol Empire, you have the unprecedented religious tolerance. Anybody can be whatever religion they want. Um, you have no discrimination about race. They don't really care about that. Uh, they don't really mess with local customs and culture, right? They have their own culture. They're not going to mess with your culture. Um, the way they saw it was that Mongol religion, the religion that they had back in Mongolia, was tied to Mongolia. They worshipped the mountains in Mongolia. So they're not going to go to a new country and worship some new mountains. They want to worship their old mountains back in Mongolia. So they come to a place where people are Muslim and they're like, sure, you go ahead, be Muslim because you're not around our Mongolian mountains. So we can't force you to worship our Mongolian mountains. A lot of the ways that they ran the empire, they came to in a consensus in what's called a Kurultai that we'll talk about later. There's this culture of meritocracy, so there's no giving jobs to people just because of their family or because they have money. They'll give it to whoever gets it, whoever deserves it, and who's the best for the job. Um, they have rule of law, right? That whenever they make a law, everybody has to follow it, no matter who they are. They promote trade because they are really concerned about making money. So making sure that trade is really safe is important to them. So on top of that, they also build roads to help support that trade. They also are in favor of everyone learning how to read and write. Uh, and also for trade purposes, they also create a postal service. This is one of the first postal services probably in the world. Maybe the Incas have it, but probably not before this. So they create a postal system that goes along the Silk Road. They are also Chinese have paper money, but the Mongolians take that idea and say, okay, you paper money that makes a lot of sense. That'll be good for trade. They spread the idea of paper money throughout their whole empire. Uh, yes, again, they when they first take over, they are pretty brutal and kill people in some pretty brutal ways. But once they are the ones in charge, they're pretty fair to all the people and don't do a lot of torture in their penal system. And also, they also believed in diplomatic immunity and ambassadors and envoys being protected in their empire. So you have ambassadors coming from Europe, coming all the way to China and being treated fairly and with respect. So all of these are very similar to how we treat people nowadays in the world. And it had not happened before this that a lot of these things had been in practice. So in many ways, Genghis Khan and the Mongolians are the first people to have this global perspective of the world, which is a big marker for what we would call modern world history. Unfortunately for the Mongols, their empire starts to split apart mostly on ethnic lines. And what we mean by that is similar to the territories that they take over, whatever like those big ethnic groups are, there's Arabs here, there's Chinese here, there's Russians here, there's Central Asians here. The empire kind of breaks up into those sections. It breaks up because it's just way too big, right? This is 1,000 years ago almost, and they don't have the internet, they don't have phones. I mean, yes, they have this great postal system, but it's just going to be really hard to hold on to something this large. It breaks up into four main parts that we'll talk about in the next slides. Another reason that it might have broken up is because when the Mongols get to a new territory, again, they're perfectly comfortable adopting the local culture. So the four different areas of the Mongol Empire pretty quickly take on completely different cultures from each other. So they'll take on whatever religion is there: Buddhist, Eastern Orthodox in Russia, Muslim, Confucianist. They take on that religion again because they're like, well, I can't worship my mountain; it's really far away. I might as well be Buddhist. So it splits into four main sections. You have the Yuan dynasty, which is in the east. You have the Chagadai Khanate in the middle, the Golden Horde over here, and the Ilkhan dynasty. And I'll go over to kind of how you can memorize this, but if you think about it, we're looking at a dynasty. Who do we normally talk about dynasties? That's China, right? The Yuan dynasty is over here. This one is the dynasty too, but it's called the Il Khan. Il is an Arabic, right? Arabic term. Il al at the beginning is Arabic, so you know that this is the Muslim one. The Golden Horde, it's in English, so maybe you could think England is in Europe, so maybe that's the European one. And Chagatai Khanate, don't worry about because College Board doesn't. So how do these khanates work? They're ruled by the yasa, which is like a rule of law, and the decree of the Khan. And so the Khan really does have last say in that territory, and you have to follow what they say. Again, it is meritocracy where you are given jobs based on your skills. There is religious tolerance. They don't care what religion you are. However, the Mongols generally adopt the religion of uh, the local people. Each of these Mongol chiefs will meet with the Khan, and then the Khans will all meet together in Mongolia as well in the Kurultai. Kurultai is like a big um, meeting of all these leaders that get together. And it's not really democratic. It's not like they all vote, but they all get to express their opinions and try to convince the great Khan or the other Khans of their side of whatever they feel like should happen. Um, they really want to encourage education. So teachers and then lawyers and artists some of the other professionals don't have to pay taxes. Everybody else has to pay really high taxes. Again, Mongolians do want to make money. And again, women are treated better than in most territories at the time. Um, so let's look at these four different khanates. The first one is the Yuan dynasty, and this is Kublai Khan. So if you've ever heard of that man's name, Kublai Khan, he is a grandson of Genghis Khan, and again, it's this one in the east. Karakorum is the main city in Mongolia, but the capital of the Yuan dynasty is going to be Beijing, or Khanbalik, as they called it. So Kublai Khan, the grandson of Genghis Khan, rules over the Yuan dynasty in using Confucian values because he gets there and he's like, "What do you guys? What's your religion? Oh, you don't really have. Well, you follow this thing called Confucianism. Okay." So he establishes a Chinese dynasty, right? So this is now after the Song dynasty. He takes over the Song dynasty. The new dynasty is the Yuan dynasty. And he is now the Chinese emperor, even though he is Mongolian. He takes it's modern day China, Mongolia, and Korea, so it's even bigger than modern day China. He gives himself the title of Great Khan, Genghis Khan. However, the other Khans of the other Khanates don't really pay attention to him and don't believe that he is the Great Khan, so they don't really follow him. It eventually is going to fall to rebellion with the Ming dynasty, so that'll be the next dynasty. So again, Song dynasty, then Yuan dynasty, then Ming dynasty. And the Mongolians, when the Ming dynasty takes over, fall back into Mongolia, and they call themselves the Northern Yuan dynasty. A famous person that we'll talk about later is Marco Polo. I'm sure you've heard of him. He is famous. He's a Venetian or a Italian that travels to China and writes a book about it. So again, you've probably heard the story that he went to China. When he goes to China, he's really going and meeting with the Mongolian Chinese emperor, right? He's meeting with Kublai Khan. So in your head, it might not be exactly what you thought it was. All right, the Il Khan dynasty, which is over here, which is the capital is Baghdad, but it's in Persia and Iraq and Syria, those modern day countries here. So they conquered the Abbasid Caliphate in 1258. That's how the Abbasid Caliphate fell apart. There are many factions within. There's a man named Timur, who we'll talk about later in another unit. They had some problems with the Ilkhan dynasty. They rely too much on tax farming, where they use up the farmland for grazing and things like that. They use paper money from China, but it doesn't actually work very well here. And then a lot of the Turkish nomadic people in the territory eventually start taking over and eventually it's going to fall to the Ottoman Empire when the Ottoman Empire starts taking over places. Chagatai Khanate is kind of the area in the middle, and the area in the middle is mostly desert, and yeah, the Silk Roads are in there, and a few major cities that are for trade, but it's mostly just really tough terrain in there. It's like Afghanistan is in there as well. They stay mainly independent and nomadic. They don't really live in the cities there. They're living a lot like how they used to live before Genghis Khan in Mongolia. And eventually it starts breaking up into pieces and pieces and pieces, and the Khan of the Chagatai Khanate doesn't really hold on to it. College Board doesn't really care about it because they don't really change anything. They don't make any new innovations there, so they don't really focus on it too much. But they do want you to know that there was four Khanates. The fourth Khanate was called the Golden Horde, and that's named after the army that was used to conquer it. The Golden Horde took over most of Russia and northern Europe. About a third of Europe they take over in 1223. They only stopped taking over Europe. They were going to keep on going, but they stopped because Genghis Khan dies, and they have to go back to Mongolia for the funeral and for a Kurultai to figure out who's taking over. So they probably would have taken over more, but they stopped because of that. Big impact of this is they separate Russia from Europe. They replace the like kind of major influencer of Russia from the Byzantine Empire. Byzantine Empire no longer has a big influence on Russia. It's really the Mongols. They try paper money here, but it doesn't really work. And they don't really feel like hanging out with Europeans. So what they do instead is they kind of hang out in the mountains or off in the pasture, and they go and collect taxes every once in a while from the princes of Russia in places like Moscow. They don't really want to go in the towns. They don't want to live there. So all they do is they just hang out off on the side and then come and collect their taxes every once in a while. But the big impact is that they are separating Russia from the rest of Europe. So when we talk about some big changes happening in Europe in the next coming units, it doesn't really reach Russia because Russia has been disconnected from them by the Mongolian Empire is kind of in between them and the rest of Europe. And eventually it does split up into smaller Khanates, and they kind of intermix with the Russians over time. All right, that is it for the Mongolians, and hopefully you'll see that they had a huge impact on history at this time, and that they probably weren't as bad as most people think they were. All right.